All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, we've got a pretty special guest today.
Good morning, Jake. Yes, we certainly have. We've got arguably the most successful chief executive in the game. He didn't score any tries for Hull KR this year, but he certainly played a major role in getting the club to where it currently sits, which is the treble holders, Challenge Cup, League Leaders Shield, Super League title at Old Trafford, thrilling day at Old Trafford. Paul, you couldn't have had a more successful 2025, and of course the measure of your success is that you sold out every game. So as a chief executive, what more could you do, mate? And welcome onto the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, it was obviously a historic season for us, something that we're all very proud. I felt it was something building, and we have been building for the last 3 or 4 years. Incremental growth, both on and off the field. You hope to win a treble, but you don't primarily set out to win a treble. In our case, we wanted to pick up a trophy in 2025 and go from there. But having picked up the Challenge Cup and being in a strong position in the league, it gave us the confidence to kick on. And the grand final in particular, being only the 5th team to win the grand final in Super League, in the modern day game in Super League history, was something that we're all incredibly proud of.
Did winning the Challenge Cup make you just greedy for more trophies, mate? Because it was the Challenge Cup in a way was a really thrilling game, wasn't it? You 8 points to 6. You won it with a try in the last 5 minutes, and a conversion by Mikey Lewis, which it had looked for 70 odd minutes as though you might not win that game. And
very true, very true. I think it's for our psyche, it was a huge hurdle to climb and jump over, because the narrative, I think people recognise that we were a strong team going into 2025, but the narrative was we still haven't won a trophy for 40 years. So we needed to get that monkey off our back, so to speak, and having won it, well, actually in the last 2 minutes of the game, and myself definitely feeling there was large periods of that game where we'd lost it.
Yeah.
I think that we grew in stature as players. We've got a really strong spine of players that have been with us and grown, but we needed to win that trophy. And I always remember Ryan Hall telling me when he was at the club that you need to lose before you win, in terms of knowing how to do that. But having done that, I myself felt, and all the players felt, and certainly Willie felt, that feeling of winning was something that you wanted to have again and again and again. It's true what serial winners say, it's addictive. It truly is addictive. And when you know what it looks like and feels like on the other side, as in side of victory.
2 years earlier, you'd lost at Wembley, hadn't you? In golden point time.
You want more, and that proved to be the case. And we've got a very well connected and focused team. And look, you don't win 3 trophies without being a very well connected club. I've said that before. I've been in professional sport for 20 years, and you can get a team on the pitch that is in a like a bunker mentality for a year, but if they're not connected to the staff off the pitch, or just as importantly, the players aren't connected to the supporters, and the supporters connect, I see it as a triangle, and the supporters connected to the players, then you don't get very far. And we've managed to create, and part of my role will be to keep together that triangle where the players are very, very well connected with the fans and staff off the pitch, and we are really genuinely one club, one team.
The other thing, we've heard over the last few years, Paul, I guess for you guys going into those big games, the excuse was always they don't have that big game experience. Now, I guess heading into next season, they can't really use that excuse. You guys have that big game experience now. It can only benefit you going into next year.
Yeah, and I saw that particularly leading up to the grand final. So we've been in big games now for the last 4 years. I think we've been in 4 of the last 6 finals with the Challenge Cup and grand final. So And I saw that leading up to the grand final, our players were very relaxed. The year before, obviously played Wigan again, and the grand final, that was our first trip there to Old Trafford, and could feel a sense of like newness and nervousness. But now they've seen it, done it, know how to win games on the big stage. The challenge, of course, now is for us to try and do it again. And I've no doubt the other 13 clubs will be doing their damnedest to stop us.
No doubt about that. Paul, let's just go back to the roots, back to the grassroots, and just give us a bit of an account of yourself and how you came to come into rugby league. Do you come from a rugby league area, or
No. So
tell us a bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm not from Hull. My wife is, which led me to come into Hull. So I'm from the other side of the Humber. So I'm from sunny Cleethorpes.
All right.
Which is rugby league doesn't really exist over there, to be honest. Even though it's only a 45, 50-minute drive over the Humber Bridge. So it's football there, and football was my family background. My dad was a professional footballer.
What was he?
In his early years. So and I was one of the millions of frustrated, not so good to be a professional footballer, but kind of had a long list of trials and never quite made it. So football was very much our background. In terms of my professional career, so my background is marketing in terms of college and uni, and then where I came to fall into professional sport was that a large part of my career was in sport, but on the public side. So I started off in a big leisure centre in Grimsby and quickly moved through the ranks, and then I moved across to Hull. And long story short, I ended up running the 8 leisure facilities in Hull. So ice rink, 2 leisure centres, a couple of golf courses, athletic stadium.
Working for the local authority.
Exactly that. And so I oversaw those facilities for a few years, and then I got introduced to Neil Hudgell in 2004 when he'd not long bought Hull KR, and he asked me to come across originally as commercial director. And I knew very little about rugby league, if I'm honest, very little at all. And I remember turning him down, actually, because Hull KR was in a right mess at the time. And he nibbled again. And I saw that Hull KR were in the playoffs at home. So I didn't tell anyone. I went to watch them, and I went into the East Stand in between all the boys, so to speak, and they got hammered in the playoffs. And back then it was season books, and they were throwing the season books on the pitch, letting it be quite known that it wasn't good enough. And at that point, I thought, I fancy this. So it's perverse, really, but I just thought they'd probably hit pretty close to rock bottom. So 2004, I went over to Hull KR, originally as commercial director and then chief executive from 2005. And we had a good time there. We appointed Justin Morgan, who at that time was the youngest Super League coach to ever be appointed. He was 29, and we appointed him from Toulouse. And we went on to have some good success. We got promoted straight away out the second tier, won the Northern Rail Cup. And in that, my first stint there, something that I was probably most proud of is when we got promoted to Super League, we managed to stay in Super League. The 3 clubs prior in the three previous years all got relegated. So I felt that was a real achievement. So I did 4 years there. And then in the summer of 2008, I got a call. It's funny how your career's sort of dictated, I suppose, to some extent. So it was an unknown number, and I don't normally answer unknown numbers, and on this occasion I did. And it was a recruitment agent asking me if I wanted to work in football. And I said, who for? And he said, oh, I can't tell you. I said, well, I can't tell you if I'm interested then. But it was Wolves, and Wolves had asked this guy to ring me, which was funny, really, because in the back of my mind, I always thought I wanted to work in football, but never thought, if I'm honest, in rugby league that I'd be spotted or my name put forward. So anyway, I went to see Wolves the following week, and football being the whirlwind that it was, I was in a hotel in Wolverhampton within a couple of weeks working for Wolves. So suddenly I was in football, and they were in the Championship in the second tier at the time, and I knew a bit about football, and they were saying that they'll get promoted that year and they'll get into the Premier League, and I thought, well, there'll be about half the league thinking the same, but I'll give it I'll back myself, and they were champions first year. So within a year,
the way that Wolves are at the moment, they might call you again, mate.
I know. So and then I ended up having 13 years in football. So we're in the Premier League.
Did you go to Stoke as well? Was it Stoke you went to?
That's right. Yeah, I had 6 years at Wolves, and then Wolves were at the time one of only 8 clubs to be double relegated over 2 years. They got relegated out the Premier League, appointed some poor managers, went straight through the Championship, and ended up in League One. And at that point, I felt that my job may be at risk, although we won League One to get back into the Championship. And I was fortunate enough that Stoke City called me, who were in the top 10 in the Premier League at the time, and asked me to join them, which I did. And again, fortunately, I didn't have to move house or move my family again, because Stoke City was literally equidistant from my house than Wolves was. I just had to turn right rather than left.
Yeah.
So, and I did 7 years at Stoke. So, which was really good, mainly in the Premier League and then the Championship. But Neil's a very close friend of mine. Always kept close with Neil. And because a lot of my football work was in London with the Premier League, and Neil's work was in London, we often would meet up in London socially. And he was always in my ear about potentially coming back one day. And my wife's from Holland.
So what was the crucial factor that finally persuaded you to make the jump?
It was a multitude of reasons, Martyn. One was family. My wife's mother still lives in Hull, and one of our daughters, they've all grown up now, had moved back to Hull. So one was family. 2 was COVID, just about to move into COVID. We were in COVID in 2020. But 3 was that I was edging towards coming back. I wanted to be at the right position where I felt I'd done my job at Stoke, but at the same time that the platform was there for me at Hull KR to be able to do some good work, because obviously having been there, I knew the fan base, I knew the area. I just wanted to truly understand exactly. Hull KR was in a poor position financially on the pitch. It needed a lot of work doing to it. I just needed to fully understand to what extent it needed work doing to it. And once I understood that, then, like I say, knowing the club as I did and the area, I felt that hopefully we could supercharge and hit the ground running.
I remember, was it right about 2020, Neil Hudgell saying that he wanted to sell the club at that time. I think he got to the point where he probably felt he'd probably had enough, really. Maybe a bit of frustration creeping in and so on. I mean, they'd had that incredible relegation back to the second tier with the £1 million game against Salford in 2016, although they bounced back very well from that, didn't they, and came back up into Super League. But Neil, I think he actually did put the club on the market for a brief period at one stage. But then, was that when you came back into the club, and presumably you had a bit to do with persuading him not to step away?
Yeah, it was a funny situation, really, because so I was living in Stafford in the Midlands with football. I talked to Neil, and he was disillusioned. Obviously, like all owners in rugby league, that they put money into the club on a yearly basis, and he was tired of the struggles that Hull KR were facing in the bottom 3 or 4, and he'd fallen out of love with the game. So I'd actually come back to sell the club for Neil, But at the same time, I knew that by selling the club, I'll be coming back and probably doing myself out of a job. So I was quite relaxed, really. We did openly look to try to sell the club, but at the same time, we were progressing as a club operationally and on the pitch. And he could see a few small shoots of progress. And then after about 6 or 7 months, he just said, he just casually said to me, just take it off the market. And then we progressed from there.
Did you actually have any potential purchasers who expressed an interest in buying it from him?
Yeah, we actually had at the time we actually had 2 very detailed conversations with Brisbane Broncos, who were very interested. So I had a couple of teams call with the then chief executive, to the point where then I brought Neil into a team's call. I can't remember the guy's name actually. It fell down on the basis that the chief executive left pretty quickly for whatever reason, and the new chief executive that came in, that I think was the previous FD, wasn't as interested in the potential of it, so it fell through. But yeah,
what was their angle, Paul? Do you think?
I think it was. So first of all, Broncos are a very wealthy club, as we all know, biggest brand in Australia.
Mm.
It's ironic that we're playing in the World Cup Challenge in a couple of months. So, and they saw it as a potential for player pathways in both directions at the time. They saw it as to have a foothold in Super League. Obviously, we never got to the stage of talking exact detail on money. So, but we were well down the track, and there was genuine interest at the time. Like I say, it was a change of CEO that changed the direction of their thought, and you know, I'm a big believer in fate, and thank God they did.
Yeah.
Well, they did, because you know, we've had historic special times since, so, and allowed ourselves to grow. But whilst we were still like having discussions with the Broncos, then, and it was just me and Neil at the time, then I knew we were progressing as a club, so I knew that there was always the potential that Neil would decline any offer if it came that way anyway, and it wasn't at the offer stage.
Bit of a surprise for you, that one, Jake. Jake's a Brisbane Broncos fan, by the way, Paul. So
Okay, yeah.
Jake is based in Queensland, so you could have been a Hull KR fan as well, Jake.
Oh, mate, I was going to say it's almost a full circle moment next year when the World Club Challenge comes around for you,
absolutely.
Paul. Mate, who would have thought, back then when those negotiations were taking place? Was it Paul White you were discussing with back then? I think he might have been the second last CEO we had.
I think it probably was, yeah.
Back in, yeah.
I think Paul's involved with London Broncos now, isn't he, as I understand it?
Yeah, I believe so. From one Bronco to the next, but mate, what a story though. I'm not sure I knew that, mate. So
nobody did. Nobody did. It was never public knowledge at the time.
No.
But, we'd had teams call, and they'd be sat in the Broncos boardroom talking to us. So
I wonder if
Neil.
the Broncos now are seeing how well you guys have done and thought, geez, that was a missed opportunity.
Possibly, yeah.
I'll tell you one thing, Paul, on a not entirely dissimilar theme in a way, that I was looking at the early history of Super League back in the mid-1990s, and there was a famous quote at the time from Maurice Lindsay, the then supremo of rugby league in this country, who said, as you probably know, there were all sorts of proposals to merge teams in those days. And I think Maurice's quote was something along the lines of, it's ridiculous having 2 rugby league clubs in Hull. There's only really room for one, and it's time for them both to merge with each other. Well, I was going to say, thank goodness that never happened. I mean, that, unimaginable, isn't it, really?
Yeah, Hull is the rugby league city, capital city of our sport. There's no doubt about that. When you look at the attendances that we get, the attendances that Hull FC get, also remembering that there's a championship professional football club in the same city who get good attendances too. It's a sporting mad city. It's a rugby league mad city. Clearly, obviously, the only city with 2 Super League clubs, and
that rivalry is the thing that drives it, isn't it? You know, the rivalry between the two clubs is absolutely important.
Yeah, it's you can look at it in football terms when you look at Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Everton, 2 clubs from the same city. It's really important for rugby league, really important for Super League that both Hull FC and Hull KR thrive.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And at one time, both of them were not in Super League. Actually, back in the early days of the competition. In fact, when Neil bought Hull KR, when you first came on to the scene at Hull KR, they were really buried away in the lower tiers, weren't they? And it was it's been an incredible story, really.
Yeah, I think actually sometimes people don't quite realise possibly how big an achievement it is to have done what we've done from where we've come from. In 2020, we were bottom. Yeah, so you're only talking 5 years ago. We only survived not going down due to COVID. So
and Toronto dropping out.
Toronto. It's a pretty meteoric rise to go from being bottom to winning the treble in 5 years.
It certainly is. Just tell us a little bit. I mean, one of the guys who's obviously been crucial in that story is Willie Peters. Just tell us a little bit about how you came to appoint him, because I mean he's proved to be an absolutely magnificent appointment, isn't he? And inspirational, really. How did that come about, Paul?
So, I have mentioned this before. It was just myself and Neil at the time. We didn't have a board, and there's Tony Smith, who was the head coach at the time, said that he's leaving at the end of the year. So we were looking to recruit. I felt that we needed to look in Australia, and we had a good friend of the club and somebody that we both knew very well that we were interested in appointing, which was Anthony Seibold, who was the former captain of Hull KR. Anthony was defence coach for England Rugby Union at the time, and reached out to Siebes, and we had a couple of chats with him, serious chats with him. But he was a former, obviously, head coach at Broncos, and he had aspirations of becoming a head coach again in the NRL sooner rather than later, and he wanted to wait for that opportunity, which he clearly got with Manly. And but he understood what we needed, and the fact it's a really flat structure at Hull KR. We don't have no director of rugby. It would just be me and the head coach. So A, we needed to get on. B, I have a pretty strong work ethic, I'd like to think, and I'd wanted a head coach with a really strong work ethic who'd come from the pathways, also coaching the pathways and worked his way up. And Steve says Willie Peters is your man without any doubt. So he'd been assistant to Siebes previously, and he knew that Willie was keen to have that opportunity over here. So he hooked us up, myself and Willie, and I spoke to him 2 or 3 times on Teams calls, obviously lengthy conversations, understanding each other. And I knew he was like, his enthusiasm and everything, like his knowledge of the English game was incredible. Like, I know he'd been over here as a player for Wigan and Gateshead, but his current knowledge of the English game and the English players was really impressive, which was important. And then I'd said to Neil, you need to jump on a call with me because Willie's the guy that we need. He did, and he completely agreed. So that's how it came about, really. So, and I remember at the time it was quite funny because, as you do, the press over here were listing the names that would be suitable for the role of Willie. Wasn't on anybody's lips. Nobody. So I was thinking this will surprise a few.
Mm.
and he's been an outstanding appointment for us. It's not only his coaching ability, but it's Willie as a person, as a man. He's someone I have 100% trust in. He's lifted our culture. He's lifted our mentality, our winning mentality across the club, in parallel with myself. And yeah, he's done a fantastic job. He's a very detailed coach, but he's very good with the players in terms of welfare and care, and he genuinely does care about every one of his players. And I think that with the detail he goes into his coaching sets him apart.
He's also very
Mm.
decisive, isn't he? And in terms of, when to release players, when to recruit new players, and his judgment on recruitment has proved to be absolutely outstanding, I think. He's not necessarily recruited players who you might think are obvious targets, but every target he's gone for seems to have worked pretty well as far as I can tell.
Yeah, we the recruitment is just myself and Willie. Obviously, Willie identifies players. I work with the then managers to recruit the players or the options that we have within, obviously, salary cap sport. It's an interesting dynamic, really. We've been described publicly as being ruthless in the recruitment market on 2 or 3 occasions by other clubs. I won't call us ruthless. I think I like your word, but we're definitely decisive.
Yeah.
What managers would tell you is that we move very quickly, and once we've made up our mind, then it's for me to, it's for me to get the player that Willie wants if it fits in with our financial budgets. And what we're not afraid to do, and what that when I came back from football, one thing that really surprised me was that in rugby league, clubs recruit a squad at the beginning of the season, and then barring injuries, that's it.
Mm.
There's your squad for the season. Well, in football, you recruit all year round, and you
Yes.
move players around. So I wanted to adopt that philosophy into Hull KR, which also met with Willie's philosophy. It was and some of our best transfers have been during the season.
Well, Arthur
When
Morg, for example, earlier this year.
Yeah, Jack Broadbent the year before.
Mm.
Yeah, and so we are. Yeah, I put pressure on myself in terms of allowing, Willie to say, like, we really could do with doing this X Y Z, and then it's up to me to then, because clearly normally a player needs to move out for a player to move in, especially in a salary cap sport. So, but I don't mind that pressure, and it's worked. So I think recruitment's all year round, and yeah, we're not afraid to shake things up if we feel that that's what we want to do.
What else did you learn from football that you've brought back to rugby league? Do you think, Paul? Obviously, the magnitude of football over there is massive compared to our sport. But was there some other things you were able to bring back to rugby league to help the whole KR?
Internally, more of professionalism in terms of how you operate internally, whether that's through operationally, commercially. So more systems and procedures, contacts with good suppliers in terms of, I don't mean things like food suppliers, I mean things like ticket suppliers, data, insights. So I had some very good contacts there that could help us and has helped us become more professional. There isn't any difference in departments. It's just a difference in numbers. It's the same departments. It's still marketing, commercial, finance, welfare. They're all the same departments, but in rugby league, where there's one or two, there's 4 or 5 in every department in football. So, but yeah, clearly there's more money in football, which enabled me to experience some better third-party partners that we could probably bring into the club, which we did, and also perhaps me personally understanding what level we needed to get to in terms of staff recruitment internally to be able to deliver what I thought we should be delivering. So it was more experience and knowledge along those lines. And then on the on-field side, like I say, it was more about there isn't a salary cap as such in the football, although there's now financial fair play. But it was more about being far more adaptable on field and being far more constant in terms of how can we improve the squad by 1-2%? Is there an opportunity here? It's an interesting model, rugby league for me, Super League, now 14 teams, but it was always 12 teams, you being one of them. So realistically, there's only 11 other clubs in Super League. And whereas clearly in football, you're all across the world in Europe. And I always thought that, one of my jobs, and I still think one of my jobs as CEO, is to understand what every club's doing. To know what the best I can to understand what all the other 11 clubs are doing. Because I see professional sport as a jigsaw, and if I can find as many pieces to the puzzle as possible, I can direct our club in the right direction, and that's what I do. So I'm pretty well informed of what's going on in the sport. I'm pretty well informed of recruitment across clubs, and that enables us to move more smartly and more wisely if we need to.
And of course, in terms of your knowledge of the game, Paul, you're a director of RL Commercial, aren't you? The commercial arm of the Rugby Football League, you might describe it as. And
yes.
And that, just tell us a little bit about that role, because you were only appointed a few months ago, I think, weren't you, along with Eamon McManus to that, the St Helens chairman, to that body. And there's a lot of talk about potential, reorganisations of RL Commercial having a closer relationship with the RFL than it perhaps even has now. I'm not quite sure what the ultimate, how it will look ultimately, but perhaps you can give us a bit of an insight.
Well, first of all, time flies, Martyn, because myself and Eamon have been on there for quite well over a year now.
Is it over a year? Gosh, right.
Yeah, it does. And it's a 2-year term, actually, and we're there to represent Super League.
Right.
So the Super League clubs, and we're there in an advisory capacity, because clearly Rodri Jones is the MD of RL Commercial. You're right in what you say. It's the commercial body of the sport. So all aspects of commercial income, whether that's the grand final, whether that's the Ashes at the international level, or Super League games in general, then that's all the commercial and sponsorship and marketing is driven through RL Commercial. RFL therefore then run the game, run the rules, run the referees, run the amateur game, the community game, disciplinaries, etc. So it's a clear standalone commercial arm of the business. And yeah, like I say, we've been on there for over a year, so we can give insight from a Super League point of view, myself and Eamon, in terms of where we feel Super League is at for and club's opinion on various things, because it's to everybody's benefit to generate as much income as possible. As you know, the broadcast rights has come down significantly over the last 7 or 8 years. All clubs need benefactors to operate and survive. So the more successful the commercial arm of the business can be, it's to the betterment of all the clubs. It's done very well this year. RL Commercial is significantly beat budget. It's the year of the Ashes, of course, but without the Ashes, it still would have beat budget. So all credit there goes to Rodri and Joe Steele and his team. They've done really well. And it's growing. It's growing. I mean, my background is commercial, and I've been impressed. I've been impressed with that body. It works well.
More impressed than you anticipated you might be.
Yes, Martyn. Yeah, we have a terrible ability to be incredibly negative in our sport, as we know, and I've mentioned before, there's one or two journalists who just like to be negative day in, day out. Nobody talks about some of the real positives. I would say that is a real positive. We are moving in. Of course, there's work to be done. I'm talking about the commercial arm. But it is definitely heading in the right direction with some good partnerships, good sponsorships, some smart ticketing thinking around the big games like the grand final, to increase the yield of the profit of the big games. Obviously, Ashes did very well financially, so it's going okay. Clearly, a lot of things to fix in the body of the game, the RFL, and we're aware of that. To pick up on your point, there's going to be more of a realignment with the RFL in terms of if you go back a year, you had Frank Slevin as the chair of RL Commercial and Rodri as the MD. You had Simon Johnson as the chair of RFL, and then Tony Sutton as the chief executive of the RFL. So you had two chairs, two chief executives, or MD, chief executive. There's only Rodri left now at the moment, and as we know, Nigel Wood is interim chair of both bodies, and the intention is moving forward to have a chair of both bodies, a CEO, a group chair,
single individual to be the chair of both bodies.
Yeah, and a group CEO moving forward with Rodri the MD and RL Commercial remaining as a unit within itself, and Rodri reporting to the group CEO.
Yes,
and so that'll come more in line. That makes far more sense in terms of two people really running the game, the group chair and the CEO. So rather than four different voices.
Let me just ask you, though. Obviously, a new broadcasting contract is going to be sought from 2027. That's slightly complicated by the fact that there's been this NRL interest, hasn't there? And they've got the association with DAZN now, who own Fox League in Australia, or Fox Sports rather in Australia. Foxtel it is, isn't it? How optimistic are you, Paul, that the current, I mean, we were on 40 million a year a few years ago. We're now down to roughly 21.5 million a year. We really need to reverse that trend, don't we, of declining revenues from broadcasting? And I wonder how optimistic you are about us being able to do that.
Well, first of all, I don't think any pending NRL interest is an obstacle at all. We've got the way the broadcast rights work is that all the broadcasters work in cycles. Excuse me. So, and it's whatever set of property rights is available at the time. So, what I mean by that is the last set of property rights that was on the market was the Champions League football, Europa League, and is it Europa Conference, the third tier, which that cycle of rights took place in the last couple of months. All broadcasters bid on that, and there's been quite a bit of change there this time round. We're next off the block. You have to go in stages. So sometimes the broadcast rights is very much dictated to by what's happened previously. If you're in line with a broadcaster who's just spent a load of money on another set of rights, that leaves you in a stronger or weaker position. So there's been quite a bit of change on the football front. So TNT, formerly BT, had the Champions League and Conference League. They've lost those rights in the last rounds to Paramount. Paramount have come in and got the Champions League, and interestingly enough, Sky have picked up Europa League. So there's a little bit of there's quite a bit of change there. DAZN didn't pick up anything. So we move into our cycle now where it's like anything in terms of broadcast rights. You have to have, you want two runners in the race or more if possible. But for competitive tension, you definitely need more than one runner in the race. And that will dictate the price. So I'm hopeful that there'll be more than one runner in the race now. Because TNT may well look at the situation now and feel that because they have subscribers and they have a portfolio of sports, rugby union, being one, cricket being another, that they need to fill that void that they're losing with football now. Sky have been a fantastic long-term partner of ourselves for a long time. I think 30 years now. So there may be a possibility. The Zone, I don't think the Zone have enough rights over here to then be strong enough potentially to also pick up rugby league, although clearly they have the rights for the NRL. So point I'm trying to make is time will tell. We aren't going to go from our current figure, I don't believe, back to where we were, but we need to be making big strides in that direction.
It would have to be a big offer from anybody else to persuade you to leave Sky, I would have thought, because you've been with Sky for such a long time, and it's such a long established relationship that to leave them and go somewhere else, you'd be burning your boats a bit, wouldn't you? Really, if you left them to go to somewhere like DAZN or whoever else it might be, you probably couldn't go back there. In the long term, I wouldn't have thought.
That's not for me to comment on, really, if I'm honest. I won't be doing the broadcast rights personally. Obviously,
No.
that'll be.
IMG is still involved in those.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be IMG. So it's like anything, Martyn, isn't it? It's like any deal that you do. You have to weigh up the pros and the cons, and it depends what's on the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Money talks, but loyalty talks too. And it's hard for me to comment because we're not at the stage where there's any offers.
No.
They'll start really working on that in Q1 next year, and all RO commercial and all the clubs will look at any offers as and when they come through.
Just on the NRL, we've mentioned them already. Do you think there's any mileage in this potential link with the NRL? With they had this discussion after the first test. I think were you present at that discussion after the first test at Wembley?
No, I wasn't present. Obviously, I'm aware of that conversation. I do think there's interest, definitely, but it's pretty slow moving, and it needs to, from my opinion, it needs to move more quickly going forwards. And my understanding is it's with the NRL at the moment to make the next move and come forward with potentially an outline of an offer of how they see it. And I'm hoping that happens sooner rather than later because it needs to.
Yeah,
Jake, I just wonder whether, as an Australian, you've actually watched Willie Peters' progress as a coach over here. At some point, Willie's going to want to come back to Australia, no doubt. Hopefully in the distant future, not the near future. But could you imagine him at the Brisbane Broncos, Jake?
Oh, mate, it'd be a tough ask with how well Madge is going, but I'm sure he'd have a number of suitors lining up to get his signature. But I understand, Paul, you guys have locked him down for a few years now, mate, and I'd imagine you'd be holding on to him with a pretty tight grip. Have you received any inquiries from other clubs asking about his availability?
I'm glad you've moved that narrative back my way, Jake, in terms of I thought you were going to both openly promote him then for a minute. You're right. He's under contract till 2028. I have a particularly great relationship with him and really open relationship with him. And he also does, obviously, with our board. So from day one, he's always had ambitions to go back. If he's successful, but he's in no rush. We both agree that you're a long time head coach. He's in his mid-40s. You need to make the right decisions. He's really well. I think he's really well looked after here. He enjoys it here. His family love it here. So, there's been no offers as such. I dare say, and I'm sure there will be at some time in the future. But the open comms that we have, we'll know about that, and hopefully we'll know about that well in advance. But at the moment, it's all about 2026, and then hopefully 2027. like I say, I think one day it's inevitable he will go back. In my opinion, he's a top coach, but he also deserves a top club. And I think that, the day when he does go back, I'd like to see him land a job at a top club and, not the club, but the first club that's sacked the coach due to poor performance, because there's normally a multiple of reasons why the coach has been sacked, and you're picking up a boatload of problems. I think my take on Willie, my personal opinion, Willie, he's at the level where
He can choose his own club almost.
I'd like to see him go to a really established club at the right time for him, his family, at the right time for us at Hull KR. And, whether that's a club where a coach doesn't have his contract renewed, or even if he's going to retire at some stage. So, I think he's of the quality to land a top job. And I think patience is key here.
Because I thought, sorry, Martyn, I was just going to say, I thought, the Knights, he would have been pretty high on their list, but I think for Willie, that Knights role, it's a bit of a tricky one, They haven't really had much success over the past few years. There's been a lot of controversy around their signing of Dylan Brown on that massive long contract, and I think when you've got someone like that on your books, it really hamstrings your recruitment. But yes, I think from my perspective, I'm happy Willie's staying over there for a few more years, mate. But if the opportunity arises down the track, I'd happily have him at the Broncos, just to go back and answer Martyn's original question.
Yeah, like I say, it's open and honest communications. There will be no surprises for either myself or Willie. He's really happy he is. He's really focused coach, and as I say, I think he's of the level that, hopefully his management team, when the time's right, will identify a club of a certain stature that he can really cement himself and continue his successful career with at the right time, which I hope is quite far into the distance.
Yeah. And what about you, Paul? Could you ever imagine yourself going back into football again, or could you even, for example, imagine yourself? I mean, obviously the chief exec of the Rugby Football League, Abby's the interim at the moment, but I believe they're going to want to appoint a full-time person in the not too distant future. Could you imagine yourself moving on from Hull KR at any point, or because that's obviously the natural order of things in a sense?
Yeah, I genuinely haven't really thought about it, which I suppose maybe is the answer in itself. I'm happy at the club. I think we've got a real opportunity now to increase our capacity at the stadium, and I think that's key for me too. That we need to really do that, because we have a waiting list of people wanting to come to the watch our games. I don't want us to lose a generation, so to speak, because we could capture a new generation here with our fan base. So I think that stadium growth is really important. I understand that it's significant investment, and that's something that the board will have to consider. But that will be the next stage of our growth as a club, and that's what I'm focused on at the moment.
And whereabouts are you on that? I mean, obviously, to expand a stadium, you have expanded it since you've been there already. Yeah. But it's a fairly lengthy process, obviously involving putting together several pieces of a jigsaw, finance, planning, and all sorts of issues that you have to get in place. How near are you to be able to expanding the stadium, and what capacity do you think it's realistic to expand it to?
So I think the club ultimately could have, and it might not even be in the reign of the current board, but ultimately a 15,000 stadium capacity would be ideal for the club. I think that the fan base of the club could definitely average 13,000 a game, if not higher. But as you say, it takes time, and it's significant cost. Building costs now, are off the charts. It doesn't justify a return on investment, and I fully understand that from the board. So it's I'm not going to give you a direct answer on that. All because I haven't got one. All I'll say is that it's a topic that we're talking about consistently. In fact, we've actually got a board meeting tomorrow, and that's a key topic on the board. Is how do we progress? We've taken the stadium to 11,200 with extending the east stand with temporary seating. We can add another 1,000 at the south if we wanted to, which we tend to do towards the run into the end of the season. That takes us to 12,200. But of course, you'd like to think that we at some point we do turn an element of the temporary into permanent. But it's not that we haven't got the ability, because as I say, we've got the ability through temporary to add another couple of thousand, which we will need. So that does buy us time. Does buy us time.
Would you imagine, for example, that the way to expand the stadium would be to build a stand at what's currently the Craven Street end?
Well, there is logic in that, obviously, although Craven Street is extremely popular for us, and it's really unique, and it creates a unique atmosphere that works well for us. What moves the dial? What moves the dial for professional clubs is corporate. Corporate hospitality is what moves the dial, and therefore we would really need a new West Stand. You're talking 25 mil plus for a West Stand with all the corporate facilities and fit out, and that money doesn't come along easy. So that's where you've got really, really big decisions in a cash-strapped sport. So yes, it's great to get more fans in, but financially, it's corporate. The best corporate facilities in Super League, bar none, is Headingley and Leeds Rhinos, in my opinion. And I know how much they generate at the Rhinos through corporate. They have significant corporate space, accepting fully that it's it's in the city of Leeds. It's a huge banking industry in Leeds, and there's some real wealth there. But I think that for us to financially move the dial, we'd need to look at our corporate situation, which involves a lot deeper thinking, deeper pockets, and more long term. I think what in the short term we've got to look at is, can we, for example, take the East Stand extension that's temporary and turn that permanently?
Absolutely, yeah. Can we just look ahead before we finish, just to the new season? Obviously, you've got two incredible things. The World Club Challenge, which you sold out in absolutely no time at all at MKM Stadium in West Hull. And then, of course, immediately after that, you're jumping on a plane and going to Las Vegas to play Leeds. That's going to give you a prominent sort of a prominence that even winning the grand final perhaps didn't give you into quite the same extent, isn't it? I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely, and we have proven to be very good at capitalising on such situations in terms of marketing, our social growth, our sponsorship growth. So, and our brand. Like you say, it's the biggest domestic game in the world for our sport. Then we go to Vegas, where the eyeballs on that weekend is incredible. Two huge games for us to start back to back. We play the World Cup Challenge on a Thursday, and we jump on a plane on that weekend to fly to Vegas. So it's a big challenge for us. We're aware of all the stats. We're aware that we know what we've got to do. We know we're always in tune with history. So a stat is that there's been, I think, 10 NRL clubs that have played at Vegas and 2 Super League clubs that have played at Vegas so far. So 12 clubs, and not a single club in that year has won a trophy when they've been at Vegas. And that, which, you're talking Panthers, you're talking Roosters, you're talking all the big boys, Storm. None of them have won a trophy the year they played at Vegas. So we know we've got a big challenge ahead of ourselves, but like I say, we're aware of all those stats. So it's a very, very difficult start to the season. We've got the whole derby in round 6. We have got both games away in France in March and April. So we fly to France twice in the space of 4 weeks. So yeah, as tough a start to the season as you could envisage, but that's what champions sides need to face, and that's when you win trophies, you get the privilege of playing in major games like the World Cup Challenge, and we've been prominent enough to be able to be chosen for Vegas. So we're relishing the opportunity, excited. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in our position, as tough as it is?
Yeah, well, every other club would want to.
Yeah.
Just how many fans do you think you'll take to Vegas, Paul? Have you? I mean, I think you and Leeds are taking 8,000 between you. Is it? Is that the?
That's right. That's right. Around that mark. It's difficult to totally know, Martyn, because you can buy centrally too. So, but around that mark, it'll be about, between us. It'll be around 8,000. Leeds Rhinos. We've got a great relationship with Leeds. So we're really closely together. I think they'll be super competitive as they were this year. So actually, the game is, when you think that two clubs are chosen a year in advance, and you've got the triple winners and a real threat for all the trophies next year in Leeds Rhinos, I think it'll be a fantastic game.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just quickly from me, Paul, I was just intrigued to get your thoughts. When you first came back to Hull KR, I just want to know, was there a ballpark sort of time frame you had in your head to return the club to success? And because, like you mentioned, it's happened quite quickly. Did you anticipate it was going to happen this quickly? Obviously, you're playing in Vegas next year, World Club Challenge. Was this all a part of the grand plan?
Well, in truth, take the World Cup Challenge out of it, because I hadn't thought that far ahead. When I came back, I did say to Neil, 5 years, give me 5 years to and I arrived on the 1st of November 2020, so I did it with 3 weeks to spare.
If that's not a testament for goal setting.
Week in October, I just got in there in the 5-year period. So
Brilliant.
there was a plan.
Congratulations.
I don't believe you should go to a club without a plan, and like I never agree with people that aren't bold enough. You need to be. I didn't shout that from the rooftops. That was something that I told my owner that I wanted us to try and achieve as a group, as a collective. Yeah, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without the board that we have, and everybody involved. It's easy to say, oh, of course you're going to say, but it's so true. We are all one piece of the jigsaw, and I might be the figurehead for many of these conversations, but there's so many people that do so much work, and we've got such a engaged and proactive board that has helped us get in the position we are, willing to be able to deliver what is delivered.
And final point, really, from me, Paul. What about the state of the game generally? I mean, you've obviously been involved in football at a pretty, with clubs at a pretty high level, and clubs that have, got money to spend, basically. Whereas in rugby league, we've got to count every penny. For the most part, because we're not a wealthy game in the way that even, for example, rugby union is. How frustrating do you find that? And do you think that situation will ever change?
I think for the first time in the last, if I go back to rugby league commercial, there really is some intelligence and data-driven insights that show that we are growing as a sport in terms of over here, in terms of people that attend games. Their attendances have never been higher. People that watch Sky, the live games, is really strong. The appetite for the sport you saw at the highest level with the Ashes. But clearly the broadcast rights dictate that, and the broadcast rights dictate the finances. What I get continually disappointed about personally is how many things are played out in public. Owners in this sport have far too much voice, and they've been indulged for too long. We need to bring in the right leader who is allowed to lead, and everybody concentrate on their own clubs. Far too much gets into the social media in this sport that shouldn't, and that continually frustrates me.
Right, okay. Were you supportive of the changes that were made at the RFL, with the former directors, leaving and the new regime coming in with Nigel Wood and obviously Abiy Akoku's now there as interim chief and so on. Were you supportive? Did you see the need for those changes?
Yeah, I'm supportive. As a club, we're supportive of Nigel, definitely, and his experience of the sport. I don't know Abby very well personally. To be fair, he's only in on an interim basis, so that wasn't something that I particularly got an opinion on. But Nigel, in particular, who I knew obviously from my first stint, and Neil's been the owner throughout. Then we definitely endorsed Nigel coming back and steadying the ship. Now we've got to kick on.
Yeah. You were supportive of moving to 14 as well, weren't you? But I think your preference would have been giving it another year. But you think this coming year can be a really successful year for Super League, Paul?
Yeah, you've summed it up really, Martyn. We felt that the three clubs needed a year to recruit, and we just don't think there's enough players on the market to be competitive to just jump to 14 teams. That said, the majority of the clubs thought otherwise. It's a democratic process. So, but the principle of going to 14 and obviously eradicating all but one loop fixture, if you count Magic as a loop fixture, but I count it more as an event and an event based on derbies. So your league, no club has 2 home games or 2 away games against the same team. So that's what I class as a loop fixture. And eradicating that, I think, was a smart move. So absolutely, the principle of 14 we agree with, but we would have liked to have seen them given a year to establish themselves and be able to internally, to be able to recruit more openly and wisely, and give themselves a year to hit the ground running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, fellas. Well, we've probably taken enough of your time this morning, Paul. You've been very generous. Nothing else from you, Martyn?
No, I think that's absolutely marvellous, Jake, and thanks, Paul, for coming on and joining us.
Pleasure.
I hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and that, at some time, maybe midway through this coming season, you'll be coming back to join us as the World Club champions. And
how good would that be?
It would be absolutely fantastic, wouldn't it? Yeah,
absolutely.
It would. And let's hope that we can.
You don't mean that, Jake?
No, not for Jake, perhaps.
Yeah, well, exactly. I get that completely.
The way I see it is, I'll win either way. If you guys win, I'm happy for the English game. If the Broncos win, I'm happy for myself. So, but if you do win, again, Broncos will be thinking about that decision to walk away from those negotiations all those years back, mate. So,
Quite.
We'll have to cause a bit of stir in the media in the lead up. You guys can have that underdog tag and use that to your motivation. And I'm really looking forward to the match.
Looking forward to seeing Reece Walsh and his colleagues actually in Hull. That's going to be absolutely fantastic, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I'm really pleased it's in the city of Hull. It's obviously the first opportunity we as a city have had to host a World Cup challenge, and it was important to us that we kept it in the city. The reality of how we've sold the tickets to the game, we probably could have, well, not probably, I'm sure we could have sold 35,000, 40,000, to be honest. They sold that quickly, but we're still really pleased that we kept it in the city. We didn't want to take it out to Leeds or any further afield. It was important to us in a rugby league mad city that people got the opportunity of seeing the likes of Reece Walsh and co.
Yeah, absolutely.